I never thought I would tell this story publicly. There was a time when I would have done everything in my power to silence anyone who spoke the name of Jesus around me. But today, I stand before you with tears in my eyes and gratitude in my heart, because the very Savior I rejected became the one who saved my life. And what happened the night I tried to destroy evidence about him still haunts me to this day. My name is Rashid. For privacy reasons, that is not my real name. I was born and raised in a conservative region of Sudan, near Kordofan, in a town where everyone knew everyone else's business and religious devotion was not a private matter, but a public expectation. My father was highly respected in our community, and from the time I could speak, everyone expected me to follow a religious path. By the age of 12, I had memorized large portions of the sacred texts. By 16, people in my town already spoke of my future as a religious leader. By 29, I had become an Imam. From the outside, my life appeared complete. I was respected. I was educated. People listened when I spoke. Families sought my advice. Young men looked up to me, but deep inside, there was a question I never dared ask aloud. Why did I feel so empty? Every night after leading prayers and teaching others, I would return home and feel a strange loneliness settle over me. I buried the feeling. I convinced myself it was weakness. I told myself that if I worked harder, studied more, became more devoted, the emptiness would disappear. Instead, it grew year after year. And then something happened that changed everything. One afternoon, a young man entered my office. He looked nervous. His hands trembled. He kept glancing over his shoulder as though someone might be following him. "Imam," he said quietly, "I need help." I invited him to sit. For several minutes he said nothing, then he pulled a small book from inside his jacket. The moment I saw it, my heart began pounding. It was a Bible. I immediately felt anger rise inside me. "Where did you get this?" He lowered his head. "I have been reading it in secret." My face grew hot. "What nonsense have you filled your mind with?" Instead of arguing, he looked directly into my eyes. What he said next disturbed me more than I wanted to admit. "Imam, I met Jesus." I nearly laughed, yet something about his expression stopped me. He was not joking. He was not confused. He looked convinced, certain, almost peaceful, a kind of peace I secretly wished I had. I dismissed him quickly and warned him never to bring such ideas into my office again, but after he left, I could not stop thinking about him. His eyes stayed in my mind. That peace stayed in my mind. For the first time, I found myself wondering why. Weeks passed, then months. I assumed I would never see him again. I was wrong. One evening, walking through a market, I noticed him speaking with another man. The moment he saw me, he grew nervous. I expected him to run. Instead, he approached me. "Imam," he said respectfully. Before I could respond, he handed me a folded piece of paper, then walked away. I nearly threw it into a trash bin, but curiosity got the better of me. When I opened it later that night, I found a single sentence written in Arabic. "If you seek the truth with all your heart, Jesus will reveal himself to you." I felt furious. I crumpled the paper. Yet, for reasons I still cannot fully explain, I did not throw it away. I placed it inside a drawer. That night I slept badly, and for the first time in years, I had a dream. In the dream, I stood alone in a vast desert. Dark clouds covered the sky. A violent sandstorm surrounded me, and no matter which direction I turned, I could not escape it. The wind grew stronger. The darkness deepened. Then in the distance, I saw light brighter than the sun, yet it did not hurt my eyes. I began walking toward it. The closer I came, the more peace I felt. Then I heard a voice filled with authority and compassion. "Rashid." I froze. The voice knew my name. "Rashid." The second time it spoke, I felt something I cannot fully describe. Love, pure love, the kind I had searched for my entire life. I wanted to move closer, but suddenly I woke up. My heart raced. Sweat covered my body. I sat on the edge of my bed until sunrise. For days I told no one. I convinced myself it was merely a dream, nothing more. Yet deep inside, I knew something was happening, something I could not explain. And then the impossible began. 3 weeks later, another person approached me, then another, then another. Each one told a similar story. Each one claimed to have encountered Jesus. Each one described a peace that sounded remarkably the same. I became obsessed, not because I believed them, but because I wanted to prove them wrong. I started collecting information. I searched for contradictions. I prepared arguments. I read materials I had previously ignored, determined to destroy their claims once and for all. But the deeper I investigated, the more questions emerged. Questions I could not answer, questions that kept me awake at night, questions that threatened everything I had built my life upon. And then, one evening, I obtained something I never expected, a Bible of my own. My plan was simple: study it, refute it, expose it. I locked myself in my office and opened the first page. I expected confusion. Instead, I found myself strangely drawn in. Hours passed, then more hours. Before I realized it, the call to morning prayer echoed outside. I had spent the entire night reading. What happened next terrified me, because for the first time in my life, I was no longer certain of what I believed, and that uncertainty would soon cost me everything. The days that followed were unlike anything I had experienced. By day, I continued my duties as an Imam. I stood before people who respected me. I taught lessons, answered questions, delivered sermons. No one suspected the battle raging inside my heart. But every night was different. After everyone had gone home and the town had grown quiet, I would lock my office door, pull out the Bible, and continue reading. At first, I searched for mistakes, reasons to reject it, evidence that would let me dismiss what I kept hearing. Instead, I found myself confronted by a person, Jesus. The more I read, the more fascinated I became. His words were unlike anything I had encountered before. His compassion toward the broken, his mercy toward sinners, his authority over sickness, his power over death, and perhaps most disturbing of all, his love for those who hated him. One night I reached a passage where Jesus prayed for the people persecuting him. I stopped reading. I stared at the page for several minutes, then whispered aloud, "Why would anyone do that?" The room was silent, but the question lingered. Why would someone willingly forgive people who wanted him dead? That question followed me for weeks. Soon my lack of sleep began affecting my daily life. An elderly man in our congregation approached me after prayers. "Imam, are you feeling well?" I forced a smile, of course. But I was not well. My mind felt divided. Every answer created new questions. Every attempt to silence my curiosity only made it louder. Then one evening, I came across the story of the prodigal son. As I read, unexpected emotions surfaced, mistakes I had buried for years, failures nobody knew about, moments of anger, of pride, of hypocrisy. The story felt personal, too personal. I closed the Bible and pushed it away. My hands trembled. "What is happening to me?" I whispered. For the first time, I was not merely studying. The words were reaching my heart, and that terrified me. Days later, an event occurred that nearly exposed everything. I had hidden the Bible inside a locked drawer in my office. No one knew it existed, or so I believed. One afternoon, I returned unexpectedly, having forgotten an important document. As I approached my office, I noticed someone standing inside, one of the younger assistant leaders at our mosque. My heart sank. The drawer was slightly open. The assistant stepped away quickly when he saw me. His face was pale, too pale. Neither of us spoke. For several uncomfortable seconds, silence filled the room. Then he excused himself and left. The moment he disappeared, I checked the drawer. The Bible had been moved. Someone had seen it. That night I barely slept. The next morning confirmed my fears. The atmosphere around me had changed. People who normally greeted me warmly seemed distant. Conversations stopped when I entered a room. Several leaders exchanged strange looks. I knew rumors had begun. I still hoped the situation could be controlled. I was wrong. 3 days later, I received a request to attend a private meeting. The moment I entered the room, I knew something was wrong. 5 senior leaders sat around a table. No one smiled. No one offered tea. One of them spoke first. "Rashid, we have concerns." My pulse quickened. "What concerns?" Another leaned forward. "We have received troubling information." I remained silent. Then came the question I had feared. "Have you been reading Christian materials?" The room felt smaller, hotter. For a brief moment I considered lying, but something inside me resisted. I answered carefully, "I have been researching various claims." The response did not satisfy them. The questioning continued for nearly 2 hours. Where had I obtained the Bible? Who had given it to me? Had I been meeting Christians? What exactly was I studying? The interrogation grew increasingly intense. By the end, I felt utterly exhausted. Before I left, one leader looked directly into my eyes. His voice was cold. "Be careful, Rashid." The warning was unmistakable. I returned home shaken. That night I made a decision. I would stop reading. I would end the investigation. I would put everything behind me. The risks had become too great, my reputation in danger, my position in danger, perhaps even my safety. So I locked the Bible away, and for several days I avoided it completely. But something unexpected happened. The emptiness returned, stronger than before, the same emptiness I had carried for years, now suddenly unbearable. No matter how hard I tried to distract myself, it remained. I worked longer hours. I spent more time with people. I immersed myself in responsibilities. Nothing helped. Finally, after nearly a week, I gave up. Late one evening, I reopened the Bible, and the moment I began reading, something changed. Peace. Not complete peace, not yet, but enough to make me realize what I had been missing. I sat there for hours. Then, without planning to, I prayed. It was not a formal prayer, not polished. It was simply honest, perhaps the first truly honest prayer of my life. I looked upward and said, "God, if Jesus is truly who these people claim he is, show me the truth." The moment those words left my mouth, fear gripped me. I could not believe what I had just prayed. For several minutes I sat frozen. Then I closed the Bible and went home. The next 48 hours would become the most important of my life. For 2 days after that prayer, I lived in a state of constant tension. Part of me regretted what I had said. Another part desperately hoped for an answer. I tried to focus on my responsibilities, but my thoughts kept returning to those words. "God, if Jesus is truly who these people claim he is, show me the truth." The second night after praying, exhaustion finally overtook me. I fell asleep shortly after midnight, and that is when everything changed. At first the dream seemed ordinary. I was walking through a narrow valley surrounded by towering cliffs. The sky above was dark. The air felt heavy. As I continued forward, I noticed hundreds of people walking around me, some frightened, others confused, everyone seeming to search for something. Then suddenly, the ground began to shake. Small stones rolled down the cliffs. The tremors grew stronger. People started running. Panic spread through the crowd. I wanted to run too, but my feet would not move, as though I had been rooted to the ground. Then I heard the voice, the same voice from the desert dream months earlier. "Rashid." My entire body froze. The voice came again, clear, powerful, filled with authority. "Rashid, follow me." At that moment, a brilliant light appeared ahead of me, unlike anything I had ever seen. It illuminated the valley without casting shadows. It radiated peace and power simultaneously. Everyone around me seemed unable to see it. Only I could. Then the voice spoke again. "You asked for truth." I felt overwhelmed. Every fear, every doubt, every question, all of it seemingly exposed before the one speaking. The voice continued, "The road ahead will be difficult, but you are not alone." Before I could respond, the scene changed. Suddenly I stood outside my own home. The streets were empty. The atmosphere felt strange, unnatural. Then I saw several men approaching, their faces hidden, their movements deliberate, dangerous. One pointed toward my house, another nodded. A deep sense of warning filled me. Then the voice spoke once more, "Be ready." I woke instantly. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. The room was dark. Sweat covered my face. For several minutes I sat motionless. The dream felt different from any I had ever experienced, more real than many waking experiences. I tried convincing myself it was merely a product of stress. Deep inside, I knew better. Something was coming. I could feel it. 3 days later, the warning began to make sense. A longtime friend requested a private meeting. We had known each other for nearly 17 years, studied together, served together, shared meals together. If anyone understood me, it was him, or so I thought. We met in a quiet location away from public eyes. The moment I saw his face, I knew something was wrong. He looked nervous, constantly glancing around, as though he feared being seen. Finally, he leaned forward. "Rashid, listen carefully." His voice trembled. "I don't have much time." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" He hesitated, then spoke words I will never forget. "They know." My pulse quickened. "Know what?" "Everything." The world seemed to stop. He lowered his voice further. "The meetings, the Bible, the questions, the investigations, they know all of it." Fear surged through me. "How?" He shook his head. "It doesn't matter." His expression grew serious. "You are being watched." I stared at him in disbelief. He continued, "Several people have reported your activities. Some believe you are abandoning the faith." The words hit me like a hammer. For a moment, I could not breathe. Everything I had feared was becoming reality. Then he said something even more disturbing. "There are people discussing how to deal with you." A chill ran through my body. "What does that mean?" He looked away. "I don't know," but his face suggested otherwise. And suddenly, the warning from the dream came rushing back. "Be ready." That evening I returned home deeply shaken. For the first time, I genuinely feared for my future, perhaps even my life. Yet despite the fear, another realization emerged. I could no longer deny what was happening. Every attempt to walk away had failed. Every effort to silence the questions had only intensified them. And every step seemed to lead me back to Jesus, the one I had spent years rejecting, criticizing, trying to disprove. I found myself opening the Bible again. This time, I was not searching for arguments. I was searching for truth. Hours passed. Then I reached words that stopped me completely. "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I read the sentence again and again. Something inside me broke. For years, I had carried burdens nobody knew about: fear, pressure, expectations, failures, questions, loneliness. And now those words felt directed at me personally. For the first time in my life, tears filled my eyes while reading scripture. I tried to resist them, but I could not. I wept alone in silence. And as I sat there, another thought entered my mind, a terrifying thought. What if Jesus really is who he claims to be? Over the following weeks, the pressure intensified. More people became suspicious. Conversations grew colder. Friends became distant. Some individuals who once welcomed me now avoided me entirely. Rumors spread rapidly. I heard whispers wherever I went. Traitor, deceiver, dangerous. Each accusation cut deeply, yet the more opposition I faced, the more convinced I became that I could not ignore the truth. Then came the night that shattered whatever remained of my old life. It happened shortly after midnight. I was asleep when a loud noise jolted me awake. At first I thought I was dreaming, then I heard it again. Voices outside, several voices. My heart immediately began racing. Slowly I moved toward the window. What I saw caused my blood to run cold. There were men outside my home, more than I could count. Some stood near vehicles, others appeared to be watching the house. The scene looked eerily similar to what I had seen in the dream. For a moment I could not move, I simply stared. Then fear exploded inside me. The warning had been real, the dream had been real, and now danger stood outside my door. I did not know who they were, I did not know exactly why they had come. But one thing became painfully clear: my life was about to change forever, and before the sun rose, I would be forced to make the most difficult decision of my entire life. I stepped away from the window and began praying, not the formal prayers I had recited countless times before. This prayer came from somewhere much deeper. God, I don't know what to do. My voice trembled. If Jesus is truly the way, I need your help. The room fell silent. Yet a strange peace began settling over me. Not peace because the danger had disappeared, the danger was still there, the men were still outside, the uncertainty remained, but somehow I no longer felt alone. I quickly gathered a few belongings, a change of clothes, important documents, a small amount of money, and the Bible, the very book I had once wanted to destroy. As I placed it into my bag, I paused. Only months earlier I had viewed it as an enemy, now it had become my lifeline. Just before dawn, an unexpected opportunity appeared. The men outside seemed distracted by something occurring farther down the street. Without fully understanding why, I felt compelled to leave immediately. Within minutes, I slipped away. Every step felt dangerous. Every sound made me jump. Yet somehow, I reached a safer location without being noticed. When the sun finally rose, I looked back toward the town that had been my home for nearly my entire life. And for the first time, I realized I might never return to the life I once knew. The thought broke my heart. Over the following days, events unfolded rapidly. Friends stopped answering my calls. Former colleagues distanced themselves. People who had once praised me now refused to speak with me. The reputation I had spent decades building collapsed almost overnight. The loss was painful, but nothing compared to what happened next. My family learned about the accusations. At first, they refused to believe them. Then the rumors intensified. Eventually, difficult conversations became unavoidable. I remember sitting across from one of my relatives, the disappointment in his eyes unbearable. "Tell me it isn't true," he said quietly. I struggled to answer, because I was not even fully sure how to explain what was happening to me. How could I describe a journey I barely understood myself? How could I explain that the Jesus I had rejected was becoming impossible to ignore? The conversation ended badly. Several others followed. Each one left deeper wounds. Some family members stopped speaking to me altogether. Others viewed me with suspicion. A few openly condemned me. Every rejection felt like another piece of my heart breaking away. Many nights I cried myself to sleep, not because I doubted what I was discovering, but because of the cost. Following truth sounded noble in theory. Living it was far more painful. Weeks later, while staying in a temporary location outside Omdurman, I received a message from an unknown number. At first, I ignored it. Then another message arrived, and another. Finally, curiosity overcame caution. I opened the message. It contained only a few words. "You are not alone." No name, no explanation, just those words. I stared at the screen. Then another message appeared. "Someone wants to meet you." My first reaction was suspicion. Was this a trap? Had someone discovered my location? Were they trying to lure me out? For several days I wrestled with the decision. Eventually, after careful consideration, I agreed. The meeting took place in a modest apartment. Nothing about the location seemed remarkable, but what happened inside would alter the course of my life forever. When I entered, I was greeted by several people, men and women, young and old. Some appeared nervous, others smiled warmly. What shocked me most was what they had in common. Every one of them had experienced persecution because of their faith in Jesus. As I listened to their stories, I felt overwhelmed. One had lost employment. Another had been rejected by family. A third had endured threats. Yet despite everything they had suffered, they possessed something I could not ignore: peace. The same peace I had seen years earlier in the young man who first brought a Bible into my office. The same peace I had witnessed again and again, a peace that circumstances could not destroy. One elderly believer noticed my silence. He smiled gently, then asked a question that pierced straight through me. "Rashid, what are you searching for?" The room became quiet. I wanted to give a complicated answer, an intellectual answer, a theological answer. Instead, the truth came out. "I'm searching for certainty." The man nodded, then opened a Bible. He began reading passages about Jesus, not arguments, not debates, simply the words of Christ. As he read, I felt tears forming again. Something deep inside me was awakening. For years I had searched for answers through knowledge, yet the answer standing before me was not merely information. It was a person. That realization terrified me, because if Jesus truly was who he claimed to be, then my entire life would need to change. Everything. My identity, my future, my ambitions, my understanding of God, all of it. The meeting lasted several hours. Before leaving, one woman said something I have never forgotten. "Jesus isn't asking you to understand everything before you follow him," she smiled. "He's asking whether you trust him." Those words followed me for days. Trust him. Could I, after everything I had built, after everything I had lost? The struggle intensified. I prayed constantly, read constantly, searched constantly, and then one night everything reached a climax. I had fallen asleep while reading. Sometime during the early hours of the morning, I experienced another dream, but this dream was unlike the others. I found myself standing beside a vast body of water. The surface was calm, perfectly still. Then I saw a man walking toward me. I could not clearly describe his appearance, yet somehow I immediately knew who he was. The moment he approached, every fear inside me seemed exposed, every secret, every failure, every wound. Yet I felt no condemnation, only overwhelming love. The man extended his hand, then he spoke words that shook me to my core. "How long will you stand between two paths?" I could not answer, tears streamed down my face. Again he spoke. "Follow me." Just 2 words, yet they carried more power than anything I had ever heard. At that moment, I felt something break inside me. Years of resistance, years of pride, years of certainty, gone. When I woke, tears still covered my face. The room was dark. My Bible remained open beside me, and for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I dropped to my knees, my entire body trembled, and there, alone in that room, I surrendered my life to Jesus Christ. I confessed my sins, I asked for forgiveness, I invited him to become the Lord of my life, and as I prayed, an indescribable peace flooded my heart. The emptiness that had haunted me for years disappeared. The burden I had carried for decades lifted. The searching ended. I had finally found the truth. But accepting Jesus in private was one thing. Publicly declaring my faith would be another matter entirely. The believers I had met in that modest apartment became, over the following months, something like a second family to me. We met rarely, and always with great caution, in different locations each time, never announcing plans in advance, never gathering the same group of people twice in a row if we could avoid it. Among them was a woman named Amira, who had once been a school teacher before her own faith was discovered by a relative and reported to local authorities. She had lost her position and very nearly lost her family, yet she remained, in every way I could observe, one of the most joyful people I had ever met. It was Amira who first asked me, gently, whether I had considered baptism. I had read about it, of course, in the Gospels, Jesus himself submitting to it in the Jordan River, the descending of the Spirit, the voice from heaven. I understood it intellectually as an act of obedience, a public declaration of what had already happened privately in my heart, but I resisted the idea for a long time. Baptism felt different from simply believing quietly in secret. Belief could still, in some sense, be hidden. Baptism could not be undone or explained away. It was a line, and once I crossed it, there would be no pretending I had not. I prayed about this for weeks. I read every passage I could find that touched on the subject. And slowly, the same conviction that had driven me to that hotel room-style surrender in my own home began to return, insistent and unwilling to be silenced. If I truly believed what I said I believed, hiding that belief indefinitely was its own kind of denial. The baptism took place at night, in a small tributary outside the city, chosen because it was quiet and rarely visited after dark. There were only 6 of us: myself, Amira, 2 other believers from our small gathering, the man who would baptize me, an older believer named Jacob who had himself been baptized in secret some 15 years earlier, and one lookout posted a short distance away to warn us if anyone approached. I remember the cold of the water more than almost anything else that night, a sharp, clean cold that seemed to match the seriousness of what was happening. Jacob asked me, in a voice barely above a whisper, whether I believed Jesus Christ was the Son of God, whether I believed he had died for my sins and risen from the dead, whether I was choosing, of my own will, to follow him for the rest of my life. I said yes to each question, and my voice did not shake, even though everything else in me was trembling. He lowered me into the water and raised me back up, and when I broke the surface, gasping, I felt something I can only describe as a kind of completion. Not the same overwhelming presence I had felt during the dream by the water, but something quieter and in its own way sturdier, the sense of a decision finally, fully made, with nothing left hidden or half-committed. We did not celebrate loudly. We could not risk the sound carrying. We simply stood together in the dark for a while, praying quietly, before separating one by one and returning to our different homes by different routes, the way we always did. I would like to tell you that after my baptism, life became simpler. It did not. If anything, the months that followed were the hardest of the entire journey. Word travels in small communities in ways that are difficult to fully explain to outsiders. I do not know exactly how it happened, whether someone recognized me near the water that night, whether Amira or one of the others was followed at some point without our knowledge, or whether it was simply the accumulation of everything that had already been suspected about me finally being confirmed by some new piece of information. But within 2 months, it was no longer a rumor. It was known. I was summoned again, this time not by the 5 senior leaders who had questioned me before, but by a wider gathering that included members of my own extended family. The room was larger, the atmosphere heavier. I will not describe everything that was said in that room, because much of it was said in anger and grief by people who genuinely believed they were watching someone they loved throw away his soul. And I do not think reproducing every word serves any purpose except to relitigate pain that has, with time, mostly healed. What I will say is that, by the end of that meeting, I understood clearly that I could not continue living in that region. Threats were made, some directly, some implied. My father, who had built his entire reputation on raising a son who would carry forward his legacy, sat through most of the meeting in silence, and at the very end, he looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before, not the disappointment I might have expected, but something closer to grief, as though he were looking at someone who had already died. He did not speak to me again for nearly 4 years. I left the region within the week, traveling first to Khartoum and then, with the help of the small network of believers who had become my new family, out of the country entirely. I will not describe the exact route or the exact means, both because it remains sensitive for others who still use similar paths, and because the details matter less than what they represented. The complete and total surrender of the only life I had ever known. I lost my position as an imam, obviously, and with it my income, my home, my standing, my sense of who I was in the eyes of my community. I lost most of my friendships, some slowly through discomfort and distance, others abruptly and permanently through open rejection. I lost, for a long season, nearly all contact with my family, my father's silence being the most painful among many silences. What I gained, I want to be honest, did not immediately feel like enough to balance what I had lost. There were nights in the first year, living in a small rented room in a country I will not name, working a job far beneath what I had once done, when I wondered whether I had made a catastrophic mistake. I want to include that honestly here, because I do not think testimonies are strengthened by pretending the cost was small or that faith erased grief. It did not. The grief was, and in some ways remains, real. But underneath the grief, something else remained constant, something that never wavered even on the hardest nights. The peace I had first felt on my knees in that room, the night I surrendered. It did not disappear when circumstances got difficult. If anything, it became more evident precisely in the difficult moments, the way a light is most visible in darkness rather than in daylight. It has been 8 years now since the night the men gathered outside my home. I live in a different country today, one where I am able, with real caution, but without the same constant threat, to speak more openly about my faith. I am no longer an imam, obviously, but I have found, in ways I never expected, a kind of purpose in walking alongside others going through what I went through, men and women from similar backgrounds who have begun asking the same dangerous questions I once asked, who have started reading a Bible they were taught to fear, who are lying awake at night wondering if the peace they glimpsed in a dream or in a stranger's eyes might actually be real. I correspond, carefully and through channels designed to protect everyone involved, with several small groups of believers still meeting in secret across different countries in the region. I have been able, occasionally, to help in small ways, connecting people with resources, with community, with a Bible in their own language, with simply the knowledge that they are not the only one. Amira, the woman who first asked me about baptism, eventually had to leave the country herself as well, for reasons of her own that are not mine to tell. We remain in contact. She continues, from wherever she is now, to do exactly the kind of quiet, patient, courageous work she has always done. My father, 4 years of silence, eventually gave way, unexpectedly, to a single phone call. I will not describe everything that was said, because much of it belongs only to the two of us, but I will tell you that he did not call to tell me he had come to share my faith. He called, I believe, simply because 4 years is a long time to not speak to your son, and because grief, even grief over a choice you cannot accept, eventually makes room for love to find a way back through. We speak occasionally now. It is not the relationship we once had. It may never be, but it is something, and I am deeply grateful for it. I have hesitated for years to share this story publicly, even with my identity protected, even with the details changed enough to keep the people I love safe. Part of that hesitation was fear, plain and simple. Part of it was a lingering uncertainty about whether my story was significant enough to be worth the risk of telling it. But I have come to believe that silence, past a certain point, becomes its own kind of dishonesty. I think of the young man who first walked into my office all those years ago, hands trembling, risking everything to hand a Bible to an Imam he had every reason to fear. I think about what it must have cost him to keep coming back, to keep trying, even after I threatened him the first time. I do not know what became of him. I never learned his real name, and by the time I might have thought to ask, it was too dangerous for either of us to maintain that kind of contact. But I owe him everything, and one of the only ways I know to honor what he did is to do the same thing myself, for whoever might need to hear it now. If you are reading or listening to this, and you recognize something of your own story in mine, an emptiness you cannot explain despite doing everything you believe you are supposed to do, a persistent curiosity about Jesus that you have tried and failed to silence, a dream or an encounter you have told no one about because you do not know how to explain it, I want to say to you what that woman said to me in that small apartment years ago. Jesus is not asking you to understand everything before you follow him. He is asking only whether you trust him. I did not have all my questions answered before I knelt on that floor and surrendered my life to him. I still do not have all of them answered now, 8 years later. But I have never once, on any of the hardest nights since, regretted the choice. Whatever I lost, I would lose it again to have what I have now. And if he did this for a man who spent 30 years actively working against him, teaching others to reject him, collecting arguments to destroy the faith of anyone who mentioned his name, then I do not believe there is any story, any past, any degree of certainty in the wrong direction that is too far gone for him to reach. He reached me in a desert, in a dream, in a stranger's trembling hands holding out a small book he was terrified to be caught carrying. He can reach you too. Wherever you are, however far you believe yourself to be from anything like faith, I am living proof, whatever that is worth, that he does not give up, and that the road he leads you down, however difficult, however costly, ends somewhere worth arriving at. This is my testimony, as honestly as I know how to tell it. My name is Rashid. I was an Imam for nearly 10 years, and everything I once built my life on was rejecting the very person who, in the end, became my life. I do not know what he is doing in your story right now, but I believe, with everything left in me after everything I have walked through, that he is not finished.